students, I am Mrs. Kavita Upadhyay, your English teacher. I welcome all the students of class 9 to today's English class. Students, today we are going to read supplementary reader, that is Moments. We are going to read the chapter 1 from this book. The title of the lesson is The Lost Child. It is written by Mulkerraj. Students, this is part 1 of the lesson that we are going to read today, and the lesson will continue up to part 2. Now children, objectives of lesson are to enable you to understand and appreciate the story The Lost Child, to help you get basic information about the author Mulkerraj, and to promote love for reading. Children, this story is about a child who goes to fair with his parents. He sees many things like balloons, a merry-go-round and flowers, and these things attract his attention. He wants to have these things, he wants to enjoy these things, but suddenly something happens. He loses interest in these things. What is that which happened and changed the child's attitude towards these things? We will read the story and find out. Now children, before we begin the lesson, let us know something about the author Mulkerraj. He was born in Peshawar on 12th December 1905. He has written about the poor and the downtrodden. He won Sahitya Academy Award and Padma Bhushan Award. His major works are The Untouchable, Coolie, Across the Black Waters, and Two Leaves and a Bud. He died in the year 2004 in Pune. Now students, let us start reading the story. Open your book. It was the festival of spring. From the wintry shades of narrow lanes and alleys emerged a gaily clad humanity. Some walked, some rode on horses, others sat, being carried in bamboo and bullock carts. One little boy ran between his father's legs, brimming over with life and laughter. Now students, it was the festival of spring. Which season was it? It was the season of spring, which was after winter and before summer. The weather is quite pleasant at that time, and that is why people celebrate this season, and this was the festival of spring. There was a fair going on. From the wintry shades of narrow lanes and alleys emerged a gaily clad humanity. Wintry shades means cool shades of narrow lanes and alleys. Lanes and alleys means narrow streets of villages. Emerged means came out. Gaily clad humanity means people who were wearing bright colored clothes. Some walked, some rode on horses, others sat, being carried in bamboo and bullock carts. Some were walking to the fair, others were riding on the horse's back, and some were sitting. Where were they sitting? They were sitting in bamboo and bullock carts. They were being carried to the village in bamboo and bullock carts. One little boy ran between his father's legs, brimming over with life and laughter. There was one little boy who was going to this festival, this fair, walking between his father's legs. Why? Because he was a small child. He was not coming even up to the waist of his father. He was walking between his legs, brimming over with life. Brimming over means full of life and laughter. Life and laughter means excitement and happiness. The boy was full of excitement and happiness, and he was walking on foot with his parents to the fair. "Come, child, come," called his parents as he lagged behind. Fascinated by the toys in the shops that lined the way, he hurried towards his parents, his feet obedient to their call, his eyes still lingering on the receding toys. As he came to where they had stopped to wait for him, he could not suppress the desire of his heart, even though he well knew the old, cold stare of refusal in their eyes. "Come, child, come." Who says these words? His parents. His parents call the child. Why do they call the child? Because he lagged behind. Lagging behind means he was left behind. Fascinated because he was attracted by the toys in the shop that lined the way. Lined the way means there were toy shops on the side of the road which was going to the fair, and the boy was attracted to toys and he lagged behind because he was looking at toys. He hurried towards his parents. Now when he heard his parents call, he walked fast towards his parents, his feet obedient to their call. When the parents were calling, his feet obediently followed their order. That means he started walking forward. But his eyes is still lingering on the receding toys. Lingering means he was still following with his gaze the toys. He was still gazing at the toys while he was walking forward. He was still gazing at the toys which were receding, means moving backwards. As he came to where they had stopped to wait for him, he could not suppress the desire of his heart, even though he well knew the old cold stare of refusal in their eyes. When he came to his parents, he could not suppress, he could not crush his desire to have the toy. So he told his parents he wanted the toy, even though he knew. He well knew the old cold stare of refusal in their eyes. He knew that they would stare at him and refuse to buy the toy for him. It was their old habit. "I want that toy," he pleaded. His father looked at him red-eyed in his familiar tyrant's way. His mother, melted by the free spirit of the day, was tender, and giving him her finger to hold, said, "Look, child, what is before you?" It was a flowering mustard field, pale like melting gold, as it swept across miles and miles of even land. Now children, the boy says, "I want that toy." He expresses his desire to his parents. But what happens? His father looked at him red-eyed in his familiar means old way. What was the way? Tyrant's way. He looked quite sternly at the child and refused to buy the toy. His mother melted by the free spirit of the day. Why? Mother was tender. She was loving because of the weather. The weather was fine, everybody was moving around. So mother was tender at this time. She had soft feelings for the child, and giving him her finger to hold, said, "Look, child, what is before you?" This is what mothers do. They distract the child from one thing to other. So she tried to distract the child's attention from toy to something else and said, "Look, what is before you?" It was a flowering mustard field, pale like melting gold, as it swept across miles and miles of even land. There was land, plain land in front of the child, which was full of mustard flowers, mustard plants having flowers. And this is mustard flower, and the field of mustard flower looks like this, as if it is the river of gold. Gold in liquid form is flowing in the field. A group of dragonflies were bustling about on their gaudy purple wings, intercepting the flight of a lone black bee or butterfly in search of sweetness from the flowers. The child followed them in the air with his gaze, till one of them would still its wings and rest, and he would try to catch it. but it would go fluttering, flapping up in the air when he had almost caught it in his hands. Now children, he sees a group of dragonflies. This is a dragonfly. They were bustling about. Bustling about means flying energetically on their gaudy. Gaudy means showy. Purple wings. The color of the wings was purple and they were gaudy, very bright, and they were bustling about means they were flying energetically here and there, and these were dragonflies. Intercepting means crossing. The flight of a lone black bee. There was one black bee and its flight was intercepted, means crossed by dragonflies, and there was also a butterfly. And these insects which were flying, they were in search of sweetness from the flowers. They wanted to suck nectar from the flowers. The child followed them in air with his gaze. The child looked at them as they were flying in the air, till one of them would still its wings. Still means stop moving its wings and rest. He kept looking at the insects till one of them would stop moving its wings and would sit at one place and would try to catch it. But it would go fluttering, flapping up into the air, and then the insect would start flapping and fluttering its wings and it would fly in the air when he had almost caught it. The child thought that he was about to catch it, and then the insect would fly away. Then his mother gave a cautionary call. Come child, come on the footpath. He ran towards his parents gaily and walked abreast of them for a while, being however soon left behind, attracted by the little insects and worms along the footpath that were teeming out from their hiding places to enjoy the sunshine. Then his mother gave him a cautionary call. The mother warned him to come back to the footpath. He ran towards his parents gaily. Gaily means happily. He happily ran towards his parents and walked abreast of. Abreast of means ahead of, in front of them for some time, being however soon left behind. But later on, after some time, he is again left behind. Why? Attracted by the little insects and worms. Because this time he was attracted by small insects and worms along the footpath. They could be seen along the footpath and that were teeming out from their hiding places. These insects and worms, they had been hiding throughout the winter because it was too cold for them outside. But now it was the time of spring, so they were coming out to enjoy the warmth of the sun, to enjoy the sunshine. They were coming out. Come child, come. His parents called from the shade of a grove where they had seated themselves on the edge of a well. He ran towards them. A shower of young flowers fell upon the child as he entered the grove, and forgetting his parents, he began to gather the raining petals in his hands. Now the parents again called the child because he was left behind looking at the insects and worms. And where were the parents at this time? They were in the shade of a grove. What is grove? It is the group of trees. In the group of the trees, they were sitting there on the edge of a well. Edge of a well means the boundary which is built around the well. They were sitting on the boundary, they were resting, and they called the child there in the shade of the trees. He ran towards them. A shower of young flowers fell upon the child as he entered the grove. The child entered the grove and the flowers started raining upon him in showers. Forgetting his parents, now the child was attracted towards the flowers. He forgot his parents. He began to gather the raining petals in his hand. He began to gather the flowers, young flowers which were falling over him in a shower. Now this is a grove. But lo, he heard the cooing of doves and ran towards his parents, shouting, "The dove, the dove!" The raining petal dropped from his forgotten hands. Come, child, come, they called to the child, who had now gone running in wild capers round the banyan tree, and gathering him up, they took the narrow, winding footpath which led to the fair through the mustard fields. But lo, he heard the cooing of doves. He was collecting the petals in his hands. Suddenly he hears the cooing of doves. The sound of doves is called cooing, and these are doves. He hears the doves cooing, and then he runs towards his parents with excitement to tell them that there are doves. The raining petals dropped from his forgotten hands. He pointed towards the dove, and he had forgotten that he had flowers in his hand, and when he pointed, the flowers fell down from his hand because he had forgotten all about the flowers. Come child, come, they called to the child. Now again, he was called by his parents. What was he doing at this time? Who had gone running in wild capers. Capers means dancing joyfully. Now he was dancing joyfully around the banyan tree, and gathering him up, they took the narrow winding footpath which led to the fair through the mustard fields. Now there was a footpath which was curving through the mustard fields to the fair. They took that footpath, taking the child with them. Now students, here are meanings of difficult words for you which we came across in this section. Emerged means came out. People emerged from narrow lanes and alleys. That means they came out of the narrow lanes and alleys. Brimming. Brimming means full. The child was brimming over with joy and laughter. He was full of joy and laughter. Lingering. The act of leaving slowly. His eyes were lingering on the receding toys. That means he was able to move his eyes very slowly from the toys which were being left behind as he walked forward. Suppress means control. Suppress means to control. He could not suppress the desire of his heart. Tyrant means cruel. His father looked at him in his own tyrant's way. Now children, we will read the summary of the part that we have read so far. Winter was over and spring had arrived. Villagers dressed in bright yellow clothes were going to the spring fair. Some walked, some rode on horses' back, and others were being carried in bamboo and bullock carts. A child was going to a spring fair with his parents on foot. He was happy and excited. He was attracted towards the toy shops that lined the way to the fair. He asked his parents to buy him a toy, but his father stared at him and refused to do so. His mother was in a lighter spirit. She offered him her finger and pointed towards a mustard field full of bright yellow flowers. The mustard field looked like a river of gold. Dragonflies, butterflies, and a black bee were sucking nectar from the flowers. The child tried to catch them in his hand, but they would dodge him and fly away. His mother called him back, and he began to walk ahead of his parents. But then he was attracted towards the insects and worms basking in the sun. Basking in the sun means enjoying the sunshine, and was left behind. His parents settled to rest in the shade of a cluster of trees and called him. Flowers fell over the child in a shower, and he began to collect them. Then he is attracted towards the cooing doves. He was running around the banyan tree when his parents called him, and they moved towards the fair. Now students, you have to tell whether these statements are true or false. So take out your pen and your notebook and write the answers. I am going to read the sentences for you. It was the time of winter. First sentence is, it was the time of winter. Second is, the child wanted to have a toy. Third is, the father bought a toy for his child. Fourth is, the child was going to a fair in a bullock cart with his parents. Fifth is, the child caught a butterfly in his hands. Now students, I hope you have written the answers. Let us check them. Now, the first statement is, it was the time of winter. Is it true? No, it's false, because it was the time of spring. Spring festival was going on. The child wanted to have a toy. Is it true? Yes, it is true. He wanted to have a toy. Third is, the father bought a toy for his child. Is it true? No, he did not buy a toy. He stared at him and refused to buy a toy. Fourth is, the child was going to a fair in a bullock cart with his parents. No, he was going on foot. So this statement is false. The child caught a butterfly in his hands. No, this is false. He could not catch the butterfly. He wanted to, but he could not. Now let us read the next section. As they neared the village, the child could see many other footpaths full of throngs converging to the whirlpool of the fair, and felt at once repelled and fascinated by the confusion of the world he was entering. As they neared the village, which village? Where the fair was being held. This is the village where the fair was being held. The child could see many other footpaths. They were coming through one footpath which was leading to the fair from their village, but there were several other villages also from where the people were coming from different footpaths. They were full of throngs. Throngs means crowd. People were coming in crowd, converging to the whirlpool of the fair. Now converging. What is converging? People coming from all directions and meeting at one place. This is called converging to the whirlpool of fair. Whirlpool means moving quickly in a circular motion. So the people were gathering at one place in the fair and they were moving around in a whirlpool, and felt at once repelled and fascinated. What were the feelings of the child? He was repelled and fascinated. Because he was a child, he was curious to see what is happening there. So he was fascinated or attracted. But at the same time, he was repelled. Repelled means pushed back. He was pushed back. He wanted to move away from that place because there was so much of confusion. He was afraid. A sweetmeat seller hogged gulab jamun, rasgulla, barfi, jalebi at the corner of the entrance, and a crowd pressed round his counter at the foot of an architecture of many colored sweets decorated with leaves of silver and gold. Now, sweetmeat seller, there was a sweet shop and the seller was shouting, gulab jamun, rasgulla, barfi, jalebi, these are the things he was selling. He was calling out the names of the things he was selling to attract the people, and the shop was located or situated at the corner of the entrance of the fair, and a crowd pressed round his counter at the foot of an architecture of many colored sweets. Many colored sweets were put one over the other in an artful way, as if this was an architecture. These were decorated with leaves of silver and gold. So these looked very attractive. They were in different colors and they were decorated with silver and gold leaves. The child stared open-eyed. He was totally attracted towards the sweets. His mouth began to water for barfi because this was his favorite sweet. His favorite sweet was barfi. He wanted to have it. So his mouth began to water. He felt tempted to have it. I want that barfi, he slowly murmured, but he half knew as he begged that his plea would not be heeded because his parents would say he was greedy. So without waiting for an answer, he moved on. A flower seller hogged a garland of gulmohar, a garland of gulmohar. Now, the child asked his parents for barfi very slowly in a whisper, but he half knew, he knew in his heart that his plea would not be heeded. They will not pay attention to his plea, request, because parents would say that he was greedy. His parents would call him greedy. So without waiting for an answer, he moved on. Then the next thing he sees is a flower seller, and flower seller is selling a garland of gulmohar. Garland is a wreath. This is a garland. The child seemed irresistibly drawn. He went towards the basket where the flowers lay heaped and half murmured, "I want that garland." But he well knew that his parents would refuse to buy him those flowers because they would say that they were cheap. So without waiting for an answer, he moved on. The child seemed irresistibly drawn, means he could not control. He was totally attracted towards these flowers. They smelled very sweet. He went towards the basket where flowers lay heaped. Flowers were kept in a basket. He went towards that basket and slowly whispered again, "I want that garland." But he well knew, he knew his parents' ways, his parents' habits, that they would refuse to buy him flowers also, and they would say that they were cheap. These flowers are cheap, so we should not buy you these flowers. So without waiting for an answer, he moved on. Now students, here are meanings of difficult words which we came across in this section. The first word is throngs, which means crowd. People came in throngs from their villages to the fair. Converging means moving together at a certain location. People were converging to the site of the fair. They were coming from all the directions and they were meeting at one point, which was the fair. Repelled, to cause dislike in. When the child sees the crowd, he was repelled. He did not like to enter the crowd. Fascinated means to cause to be interested and curious. But at the same time, the child was fascinated. That means he was interested and curious to see what was going on there. Hogged means sell or offer for sale, like the sweetmeat seller and the flower seller, they were hawking. Irresistibly means impossible to control. The child was irresistibly drawn towards the flowers. He could not control himself. Now children, let us see the summary of the part we have read. As they reached the village where fair was being held, the child saw people were coming from all directions to the fair. There was a huge crowd which made the child attracted to the fair, but he also feared to enter it. As they entered the fair, the child saw a sweetmeat seller selling different colored sweets. Many people were buying sweets. The child wanted to have barfi, which was his favorite. He slowly said to his parents, "I want that barfi." But he knew that his parents would call him greedy and would not get him barfi. So he did not wait for an answer from his parents and walked on. Then he saw a flower seller and was attracted to a garland of gulmohar. He again slowly whispered, "I want that garland." But he knew his parents' ways. He knew that they would say that flowers were cheap. So again, without waiting for his parents' reply, he walked on. Children, you have to answer these questions. Where was the child going with his parents? What are the things that the child sees on his way to the fair? Why does he lag behind? And the third question is, what was the child's favorite sweet? Was he able to get it? Now, these are the questions you have to write answers on your own. Now children, read the remaining part of the story and you will be able to understand it better when we continue the story in the next part. Thank you and good luck for your studies.